Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Bo&Joe. I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And today, I actually want to talk to you about something that I think you have a little bit of a background on, something psychological.
Oh.
What I want to do is I want to talk to you about the mentality of people when they are behind a wall of anonymity.
Oh, interesting. So,
essentially the internet, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows what the internet is. If you don't, I'm not sure how you're hearing us.
It's ephemeral, man.
That's right.
It's philosophical.
We're in the Akashic Record. But no, the internet has a raving problem where people who are normally good people in real life, they get online and they suddenly lose their mind.
Yeah.
And they become complete douchebags.
Yeah.
So from a psychological standpoint, before we get too far into it, what is your take on that? Why does that happen?
Well, I mean, if you do that, right, you have this veil of anonymity. Automatically, the true self, right, is going to be revealed because you don't have to be accountable for your actions.
So you think, and just to clarify, you think that these buttholes, these people who like to watch other people burn, these people, this is how they are? Like, this is the true them?
So, if you take a person, any person out of the street, and you keep doing it on a long enough timeline, you're basically, in my mind, you're going to find that pretty much everybody's, generally speaking, nice, right? They want to do nice things for other people, and once in a while, you're going to find the odds that are, sociopathic, or just generally, like you said, dingleberries or douchebags or whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
But in general, I would like to think, that for the most part, the majority of people are good. We're good-natured. But I think it's a different thing if you put anonymity. So, like in the same situation, take people off the streets, but you basically put them in a room. Well, nobody is going to basically see who they are.
Right.
So they're not looking at anybody. You know what I mean? They're under a veil or a disguise. You know what I mean? So You're completely in the same psychological space.
Right.
Then you're going to see, I think you're going to start seeing more bitterness, and at the same time, there's this idea that I think is very bad in the sense of this internet culture. In my mind, it was beautiful in the thought of it uniting everybody. But if you look at what's happening, it's more of a sense of, yes, it does unite. It provides a great, look at this. We're talking to hundreds of people that like this stuff and want to hear about this stuff. But at the same time, it also makes it so that people are more individually focused, right? Because you see things like Instagram and Facebook and all these other platforms where people are basically in a popularity contest. They're trying to be this whatever persona that realistically they're not.
It's about fame.
Not just fame. It's like individual, right? You're thinking about the individual and something that's supposed to be a platform that unites, right? So what I mean by that is the ego gets boosted into such a huge bubble that in the end you just have a bunch of egomaniacs, a bunch of people that are trying to, hit that little button that says, give me more, give me more, give me more. And it kind of goes against of what we believe that something like the internet would do, right? Unite. But if you have a bunch of people that are only thinking of themselves, that's not really uniting anybody.
Well, let me ask, is that Joe's opinion, or is that like the psychological evaluation?
Well, no. So it's been a while, man, since, what we do is technically not that anymore, but back then it was a different thing when I was studying. Even though the internet was already out, the internet started in the 90s, right? And then when I was studying in the early 2000s.
When did Bob-Joe?
Bob-Joe. Yeah.
Bob-Joe says get on the internet.
Yeah, I got those AOL discs in my house, man. Still.
I'm sure. We use them as Frisbees.
Yeah, but so back then it was a different thing. Not so many people. What is it, ICQ and all that stuff, and MSN.
It's still a thing, I think.
Bulletin board systems back in the early days,
BBS, yeah.
So stuff like that was more prevalent. So this idea of the social media, social networking, that wasn't really a thing. So for me...
that started with MySpace. Realistically it did.
Yeah, and I was already out of the college at that point. So for me, when I was studying and I was really looking into this stuff...
So you didn't have a MySpace page?
No, not until I was out of college. I didn't, to me at this point in time, even now, I have a very little footprint, as it were.
I see that, yeah.
But that's just me personal. But in regards to the psychological papers and all that stuff, I really can't tell you what the new stuff says, man.
No, not the new stuff.
My own personal opinion is what I said.
Okay. So, here's my thought process on this. There's one of the more popular games that's out right now, World of Warcraft. For those listeners who don't know, it is an online game. They call it an MMORPG, Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game.
Okay.
It is the largest, as far as I know, it is the largest one that has ever been.
Okay.
And last I looked, to something like 11 million subscribers. At their height, I believe it was over 20 million.
Wow.
And they've made a lot of money off this game. It's 14 years old and still 11 million subscribers.
Wow, man.
That says something. They're doing something right, I guess. But my question is, or not really a question, my observation is this, is the game is 14 years old, so it's starting to age a little bit.
Yeah. But
there's two sides in the game. There's the Horde, which are traditionally the bad people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their colors are red. They wear skulls and spikes and everything.
Yeah.
And then you have the Alliance, which are blue, and they're traditionally the pretty races, the humans, elves, and whatnot.
Interesting.
And they war. That's the whole point of the game, World of Warcraft.
Okay.
And I have noticed, myself being a player, since the day they opened, so 14 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time. Less now, of course.
Money, probably.
Well, I mean, not too much, but yeah. I won't talk about it. So then it's a lot. I could have bought me a car.
Probably, yeah. 14 years,
Yeah,
man.
14 years at $15 a month.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
Yeah, no. Thanks for wounding me, Joe. I appreciate that.
Sorry about that.
No, it's really not that terrible. It's what, like $2,000, something like that, over 14 years.
That's not bad.
I mean, that would buy me a very crappy car.
Yeah. Yep.
One that I probably would not have gotten as much use out of.
Yeah. More
Unless
happiness. More of a
yeah.
headache, probably.
I mean, yeah. But, so, more to the point, though, the Horde versus the Alliance, this is something that's been the whole point of the game. It's, you have player versus player content, you have player versus environment content, and the game has been really popular, but lately I've been starting to notice a trend that people my age, people your age, they tend to go to the Horde side.
Okay.
And once they get to the Horde side, like, their mentality, like, I know a lot of people in real life who are really cool people, sweet women, really cool dudes.
Yeah.
And then they become, when they get behind the mantle of their Horde character, they're like, I can't even give you a negative enough word.
Toxic?
Toxic is a good start.
Okay.
These people, I don't know if they're getting into character and they're feeling, and let me clarify that not everybody is like this.
Yeah.
Obviously there's going to be a lot of people who play Horde who are not buttheads.
Yeah.
But as an example, as a generality, there is this thing that when you sign on to World of Warcraft and you play a Horde member, your compassion, your understanding, your friendliness, your kindness, all of that goes out the window and you just become kind of an a-hole.
Okay.
And I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I know that in my case, I'm an Alliance player. I have been, that's the quote-unquote good guys.
Okay.
And I put that in quotes because there's one thing I do know from all of my travels is that really in a war, it's very rarely a case of good versus bad.
Right. It's never black and white.
No, it's never black and white. And that's a whole kind of
totally
thing they got going on with World of... No, the World of Warcraft makers have recently been using the term morally gray.
Oh,
and
interesting.
They've been doing a very bad job of morally gray, in my opinion. But as an Alliance player, I have a lot of Horde friends and family.
Yeah.
And in real life, these people are great. In game, these people are scum of the earth, and not all of them, of course. Yeah. I want to make sure I caveat that. But it surprises me the change, and it made me start thinking about it's kind of the trait we see in the internet.
Yeah,
you have these people who get online, teenagers now, even younger, are getting online.
Yeah.
And these people, as soon as they get online, their mentality, their personality changes completely.
Yeah.
Now, me myself, you've known me for a few years now.
Yeah.
When I am the same person online that I am in real life.
Right.
And I do have a problem with silly things like, as a game player, there was, did you ever play Grand Theft Auto 5?
For like a minute.
Okay. Well, it was one of the games that stood out in my mind because there's a scene where you have to torture a guy.
Okay. And
I couldn't do it.
Oh, wow.
I'm playing as a bad guy, and I started going through it, and I was like, no, That's not who I am.
Okay.
And I had to turn the game off. And it took me a couple of days before I could come back and force myself to sit through it.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. I mean, for me, it was absolutely terrible, even though it was a game.
Yeah.
Like, that's an aspect of my personality that I could never violate. Mm-hmm. I've known you for a long time. You are the same person in game. You'll shoot somebody and then apologize for it. So I've seen that.
Yeah.
But why does the wall of anonymity, which I struggle with that word, so I apologize.
That's fine.
Why does that empower something? You said that it brings out the real person. So I don't know if I agree with that.
So I wouldn't say real. I mean, if we start thinking about psychology, right? We start thinking in Jungian terms, right? Like the archetypes, right? So there's a face that you put with
describe to me. You said Jungian?
Yeah. So Carl Jung, he was one of the cornerstones of psychology, right? Apart from Freud, everybody knows Freud. Yeah. So Jung had the archetypes. So he mentioned there's a variety of different archetypes. So faces, there's many faces that you can put on. In other words, you have a face with your friends. You have a face, and I know this sounds bad.
No, I've heard this part. I never heard it called Jungian.
So yeah, so Jung is the man who envisioned all this. Very interesting person in and of itself. We should probably talk about him because he had a very interesting spiritual side to himself.
Interesting.
And a lot of very peculiar stuff, by the way. So
I imagine you think of Freud, kind of stuff he had.
Yeah,
so yeah.
But this is different.
Getting into people's minds is not something I want to do on a regular.
But seriously though, like there's a lot of very interesting aspects to that person. His writing and his musings and just basically everything that he was talking about. It's a complicated, but it's very interesting. But I'm getting a bit away from the point. Point of what I'm trying to say is everybody's got masks, right?
Sure.
When I say that, when you're at work, when you're with a particular member of your family, when you're with a group of certain people, it doesn't matter, right? Some people have these, variety of different aspects to them, and then they have to be a certain way when they're with these folks, and they have to be a certain other way when they're these other folks. So I think you see that a lot in the sense of when you get online, a lot of those masks fall away, right? That's what I meant. Like a lot of those things that you have to put on yourself, like think of it like social makeup, right?
Okay.
When you get online, you have this veil that's dropped right in front of you, and irregardless of where you are, even if it's something that can be traced, you technically don't have to be as accountable as you would have to be if you were in person, right? So here, you and me, we're talking. We can see each other's reflection. We know what we're saying. We can see the movements that we're making while we talk. We know whether or not we're offending one another. There's a lot of things that you have to take into account when you're actually having a regular conversation. When you look at something that you do online, all that's not there. So whatever type of opinion you truly have, you don't have to put a face in front of it. You're just going to blade it out. And in the sense of, I think this is where a lot of it comes from. There's no fear of retribution.
Sure. In
real life, you go to a place and you start saying the type of stuff that you hear in that game.
Oh yeah.
You're going to get punched out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
that in and of itself gives a lot of leverage to people in that state where they can just say whatever they want without any type of retribution, right? So that in conjunction with the fact of the ego, right? So there's a lot of egotistical things that are happening in society. And I think when you look at stuff online, it's a reflection, just like art, of what's happening in the societal world. If you think of things that are being important, if you think of things that are kind of being drawn to the limelight, almost everything is individualistic.
Sure.
It's about fame.
I think there's a degree of that. Like, obviously, we're on YouTube. We're not big by any stretch of the imagination. But even if we were, like, I don't think we're doing it for fame. We're doing it for conversation and for enlightenment, right? There's other people who their goal is not that.
Absolutely.
But I think that's a byproduct of it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So,
but I meant in general, like if you look at the actual most popular things, what you hear people talking in conversations, be it in just general conversations at work, at college, at school, a lot of it boils down to things that are individualistic, materialistic. Not a lot of the conversations that you hear out there in general, not specifically in a greater groups, are not the same type of conversation you used to hear 30 years ago.
Oh no, I think that's a given.
Yeah.
So that brings to mind a good point. Do you think the new generation, the one that is growing up with the internet being a household thing?
Yeah.
Obviously, you and I growing up, we went through the pains of AOL and dial-up, and
The duodecimal system?
Yes, etc. Yeah, that's a little further back, but yeah. So, and there are members of my family who are even further past that.
Yeah.
But for the generation that's growing up where the internet is just an assumed part of life,
yeah.
Do you think this, and forgive me for trying to not butcher the word, anonymity,
yeah.
Do you think this is something that they are being taught, or do you think it's something that they just learn?
Well, it's a scary thought, right? Because if you think about the way you develop from year 1 to year 7, it's a very, very important time for the brain. And like my own nephews, they're online pretty much all the time. They're on YouTube all the time. When you think of that type of impact, yeah, absolutely. Not just anonymity, just in general, having that extension to yourself, that what the internet is, what cell phones are, it shapes you, man. Like, it completely shapes what you're going to be when you grow up. The way you think, the way you perceive the world, everything's going to be different. So yeah, absolutely. I think that those generations that are growing up now are going to have very difficult situations dealing with actual emotional responses in real life because of that veil, because of having that, that screen in front of them all the time that protects them from real interaction.
What do you think that means for society as a whole?
Oh, man. I think it could either be, for sure it's going to be interesting. But
I don't know if that's... By the way, I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I hate myself. I said, do you think that's something that's being taught? I meant taught.
No, that's
No, it bothers me. It's like, wow. No, my brain couldn't let go of it, so I had to make sure I clarified.
I gotcha.
I am retarded sometimes.
No, you're not. So, back to the question at hand, all right? I think, honestly, the future is going to either be very grim in the sense of interpersonal relationships, because you could see it now, like, especially with some of the more advanced, well, I wouldn't say advanced, but like, for example, in Tokyo and different places in China, like in Korea, there's huge markets for this, like, I guess you could say, internet fame, right? Like, you see people that are, like, constantly watching people eating in Korea. Yeah, I saw that. Things like that.
I saw my sister, actually, who is a Twitch
streamer.
I can't think of partner, I think is what they call them.
Okay.
She recently explained to me that there is a whole series of channels where they just watch people eat. And
right.
I could be famous as often as I eat. Jeez.
But if you think about that, just in and of itself is completely different paradigm, right? You think about the ability of having this weird kind of Rear Window-esque perspective, like Albert,
Well, you should probably explain that for the
Rear
folks.
Window, the movie. Yeah. Rear Window. It's a movie. It's a very old movie. Interesting movie though. It was mostly about, like, I wouldn't say peeping Tom, but a person that is sort of a peeping Tom that was viewing all these different scenarios happening across to the other building of where he resided, and you could see the different situations of people's lives. In a sense, that's kind of what's happening now, but you have a much broader window.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, I think the thing that makes this different from Rear Window, is the fact that he was doing that unsolicited. Yeah. And nowadays, if it's online, you probably did it, or somebody
right.
put it up there.
Right.
So.
But realistically, man, the future is going to be a very complicated place when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to interpersonal relationships, when it comes to even romantic relationships, because people have this huge handicap because of the internet. And to what your original question, right, the whole aspect of why are they like this, I think a lot of the times you could see that as a reflection of society. And again, you and me, I think, have a very close thought upon this. I think we know hierarchies are something that happens naturally in nature, and they are a lot of different hierarchies in the place we live in. And yes, there's a lot of stuff that boils down to be, how do you say, corrupt. And that's fine, but absolutely. But in general, I think we're kind of trying to do better, which is something that you can definitely say we are better now than we were 30 years ago in terms of, our quality of life. In sense, and I'm not talking about monetary quality of life. I'm talking generally,
No, somebody that we both know and enjoy listening to once made the comment that the standard of life now for a poor person is still light years beyond what it was for a rich person 50 years ago.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, generally, what I was trying to get to in that is, even with everything that is screwed up, things are a little better. And even in that, you see that this bitterness resides very deeply in many people, because that, I think in my mind, is one of the reasons, or one of the ingredients to that toxicness of people online. They're bitter, man, and not only are they bitter, they're probably very bored.
Well, let's pause on that for a minute. Bitter indicates a substantially negative emotion. I'm thinking more. Isn't it possible that there's people like Joe Smith who has a crappy job where he gets pooped on all day. Right. He comes home, he's stressed, he gets online, he signs on to his horde character. Is it possible maybe he's just a little bit of stress relief, that's true. Wouldn't that be, and that to me seems to be the first thought. Now, that I think that's probably, and I have no facts to back it up, but I think that's probably what I feel is happening from a non-recurring role. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I get on, if I've had a bad day at work, there's a chance I'll probably be a little more edgy when I'm online. More
aggressive.
More aggressive. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. But consistently, no, absolutely not. I enjoy playing games with. When you're online, we do things. There's some of our associates we do things with online. Yeah. And I've never seen anybody that we associate with become ugly in a game. But I've seen all of us be victim of that.
That's true.
So it's something that I know that from as a father, it's one of the things I struggle with most is how do I protect him from. I want him to see the splendor that is the internet, the beauty that the internet brings to our lives. Right. And I think we both agree there is substantial beauty there.
Absolutely, man.
And the amount of knowledge that's online is, I think, is going to modify humanity going forward.
Absolutely.
But how do I allow him to have that exposure without putting him? I don't want to say literally in front of a firing squad, but even that's a thing that's happening now.
It comes with a price.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
the what's the word? The innocence. Right. Yep. And it's surprising how fast that disappears.
Yeah, and nowadays it's going to be much more terrifying because if you think about it, it's not just the innocence that you're losing. Something's shaping your child. No. Think about it that way. Like, it used to be that economists. It used to be the marketers. It used to be that publishers. Everybody had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get your attention, be it in billboards or in commercials or just generally anywhere, right?
Now it's penny ad.
Not just that, man. Now you're asking for it. Now
that's true.
You have it on, like, even like you said, like your child in this case, right? He's online for a very long portion of his day, and think about what that means. You have constant interaction with something that doesn't know that technically you're a kid. So depending on what you're viewing, let's say in YouTube or let's say in any other platform, there's algorithms that in the background are going to be automatically pointing towards new content because they're assuming that you're this type of person or that type of person.
Sure, there's a lot of assumption.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be seeing, something, you know what I mean?
Unfortunately, I do, and I've had direct experience with it. But I guess there's an argument that could be added here, and this is part of the psychological evaluation I wanted to talk about. Is it possible that this is good for humanity? There's a lot of people who say that we are too emotional or that we are too I don't want to say faith-based, but we're not as logical as we should be. And if we remove emotion, think of Vulcans, Yeah. So if you remove emotion and you stick with just logic, would that be a benefit to society?
Well, I mean, in many, many ways, yes. I would think that would be greatly beneficial, but at the same time, that's a very complicated, that's a very complicated statement, because emotion embarks upon many, many things.
Art.
Movies, books. So if you take away and you just become purely logical, then the world would be a much more boring place. there would be much less avenues of expressing your creativity. Creativity would become more of like a function than actual form, so a lot of things would take a back seat, and I think that would reshape the way we see things. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. I don't know. Maybe it would be a good thing. Maybe we'd progress faster. We'd get to new technologies faster. Right. We'd travel to stars faster. But
less wasted time, perhaps?
But would we appreciate it the same way?
So I'm thinking, this makes me think of that movie Equilibrium. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
First off, that was an amazing film.
Yeah, I love that movie.
And that was kind of, for the listeners, Equilibrium was a movie with... I can see his face. Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, yeah.
And Sean Bean. And they live in a world where emotion and art and all of that is forbidden.
Right.
And it's fascinating. It always has been one of my top underrated films.
Yeah, it's very Orwellian.
Yeah, it is. And this conversation is the route that I've taken it, admittedly, makes me think of that a little bit. But I guess... When I think about going back to the World of Warcraft reference, right now, there is, if you look around, if you go on the internet and you do a search for MMOs or things like that, you're going to see ads for World of Warcraft, and almost all of them, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen one that doesn't, say, come join the Horde.
Oh, wow.
So it's not, I don't want to say they're promoting simply the Horde.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at the player base right now, you'll find that it's overwhelmingly Horde.
Oh.
And when I started playing it 14 years ago, I played a Horde guy because I like one of my favorite mythical creatures of all time. Do you know what
Minotaur?
It is? The Minotaur. So I love Minotaurs, guys. It's just my thing.
Yeah.
I have a couple of miniatures over here from Minotaurs. I don't know what it is. I've always loved them.
That's cool, man.
But...
Just an animal.
Yeah, that's my... Yes. If I ever have a gender change, it will be to Minotaur. That's a whole other podcast.
Oh, man.
So, but... No, they have what is effectively Minotaur in that. And I started out as one of those, but all of my friends, people from work, they were all Alliance guys. They were all quote-unquote good guys.
Yeah.
And I went back and I joined them. And I've been an Alliance ever since. But like I said, I have family and I have friends who play the Horde. And when I ask them their thought process on why did you choose this?
Yeah.
The answer that I get is full of bile. It is like they hand me a handful of just poison. And it's like, here, drink this so I don't have to talk to you. And it blows me away. It's like if you traditionally, and this is just speculation on my part, but I think if you look at the Horde general age, you're probably going to see older people like us.
Yeah.
And not to say that we're old, but
I get your point.
Older than children.
Right.
I think children are more idealistic, and so they're more likely to be on the good guy side.
Yeah.
And I've never really thought of this kind of dynamic, and I think that bleeds over into some of the more, we'll say, colorful sites like 4chan and, Something Awful.
Yeah.
These are all sites that have really interesting content, and as a warning to everybody at home, if you are under 18, I would probably not visit either site.
Right.
But they are, and also if you're soft-skinned, don't go there.
Yeah.
But
it's a dark corner of the internet.
It's as dark as you get before you hit actual dark web, I think. I can tell you, I'm a frequent visitor to 4chan because they have a high resolution section, and it's some of the most amazing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they with the 4K setup that I have upstairs. It's amazing some of the photos that come out of that.
That's cool.
But also sometimes you're going to stumble across something you wish you had never seen in 1080, much less 4K. And you can't unsee those things.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. But that is probably the most cancerous group that I think I've ever experienced.
Wow.
Not the World of Warcraft people. I'm talking about the 4chan people.
Yeah.
There's they allow anonymous posting. So, holy crap.
Yeah.
Some of the things I've seen, you can have an innocuous post of some guy saying, "Hey, look, I took this picture of this barn.
Yeah.
And in the next 3 posts, you will see more racist comments than I can even think to put out in a book.
Wow, man.
And it blows me away, and it made me think, and I can't remember the exact moment, but it made me think, why do people do that?
Yeah.
Like, why do you find it necessary to tear somebody else down? And you say your first explanation was that this is who you really are. Like, and I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, that's fine.
That once you've stripped down your masks, once you've stripped down your ability to be punished for what you say and do, that your natural inclination is, I don't want to say instigative. What's a proper word for that?
I think the actual toxic part of your mind, where you're that dark place that most people will never ever reveal. And I wanted to rephrase something that I said originally was wrong. I was supposed to be talking about masks, not archetypes, when it was referring to young. Same as you. I wanted to correct that because
it wriggles in your mind.
Yep. But in reference to what you were saying, I think that usually there's a dark place in most people's mind where you reside true judgment, and everybody judges. It doesn't matter who you are. It's something that happens. But some people have. It might have been because of where you grew up or how you grew up or your environment. It might have been what you considered to be right or what you thought was taught to you that was wrong. It doesn't matter. But whatever shaped you growing up will have an embedded result in the way you see things. And a lot of the times when you have that veil of anonymity, you will actually respond in your true kind. In the sense of, if you are truly racist and you just have this mask upon your face at all times, you will be racist when people cannot see you. So I think that's a big thing that you see, especially in 4chan. And that's a very dark corner because, again, back to the bitter portion of what I was saying, there's a lot of people, especially in that place, that I think are extremely bitter. They're angry at society. They're angry at the world. They feel that reprehensible. They're reprehensible against everything that has been happening. They blame everybody. So they want to make everybody that they can feel the same way that they feel in the real world. So I think that's another portion to this slice of terrible pancake.
Would that be like a superiority complex or inferiority? Help me. Inferiority.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was having brain fart problems.
You do have an interesting way of pronunciation. So.
Yeah, I was trying to get the word out, but yeah. I guess so. I guess that's one thing, one slice of it.
Would that be I thought inferiority complex is when you feel inferior all the time, and superiority complex is when you feel superior.
Right, but in real life, these people have an inferiority complex.
I see.
You know what I mean? Like in real life, when they're going out, yeah, exactly.
To recite the inferiority complex that they feel in real life,
right,
converts to the toxicity that comes across as superiority.
Exactly. They want to they want to be what they can never be truly in real life. They want to present this image of something that they think is what they envision as heroic, or what they envision as, I don't know, power or powerful. That's another thing that you see in those aspects, like the World of Warcraft, people being bitter and angry at each other.
Absolutely.
It's power game, man. People want to feel like they have power over you, or that they insult you and they make you feel, or belittle you, or again, it's that whole aspect of how these people live in real life. And I'm pretty sure to say that most of these people, if you truly take a look at their actual lives, are going to have very sad lives. Because if you look at your life and you look at other people's, like you were talking about people that we know, they're not like that. Why would
you mean?
So if you hear of a lot of the people that we know personally, and you see their social aspect online,
right,
be it anonymous or not,
right,
they're usually true to their true selves, in the sense that they're not being a ugly. Bitter person, ugly person, toxic person.
I use the word ugly all the time, and I get called a Southern grandma. So,
but that's what it is, right? I mean, you're right. It is. It's not ugly, and I think in a lot of ways it's because the people, they have a busy life. They have families. They have things to do. They have structure. They want to. They have responsibilities. They have accountability, which is something.
Are you talking about the people we know, or in general? You're talking about the toxic people?
No, not the toxic. We know the people like yourself, for example, or other people that we know. You know what accountability is. You know what responsibility is. Things that does not necessarily come with age, but come with understanding.
But isn't there going to be? And I'm just playing devil's advocate to help me understand.
Yeah.
To say nothing for our listeners, but don't you think that Joe Blow down the street, who has maybe he's got a full-time job, he's raising 2 children, but when he gets online, he's that good that way. What about people who are like me, who are compassionate people in real life, who have families and do responsible things, but get online and then suddenly become this person? How do you quantify that?
So it's not okay. So we have to break this down even deeper if we want to get into each person's individual mind. But in a long or an overarching view, you can say that it's not something that you're going to see in general, in the sense of, like you said, there's a lot of people that have jobs, that have responsibility, as it were. Does that mean that they understand what that is? I don't know. Like, are they just doing it because they have to? That's what I mean. Sometimes what looks like responsibility doesn't necessarily mean that the person understands what that really is. In other words, in my mind, if you think of accountability and responsibility, that's something that you understand yourself, and I think you're a very good example of that you have to be, right? You understand that it's not something that you can just take on as a role. It's like, no, I'm responsible for this. I have to act a certain way. I have to do a certain thing. Sure. Some people do it because they have to, not because they want to.
I see. I've known a few people like that too. That is, I find that incredibly interesting, and this whole conversation has been something that's, for lack of a better word, been stuck in my craw for a couple of days. I see in the news now, you're going to start seeing more and more cases of these people who are doing cyberbullying. Yeah. And cyberbullying is a really hot topic right now because there's people that I've been referencing, these for example, the children who get online and they've, in face-to-face, children tend to be very clear about who they are. Right. And it's very in your face. All right, for example, kid A meets kid B, and kid B is a butthead, kid A is not. They tend to figure that out and then go their separate ways. Right. And that, of course, is something that we've all done. We've all seen it. Right. Now, when you get online and you do you're just doing you, and then somebody comes on and starts spitting poison to you that you've never encountered before. Yeah. Like, I just... in people right now, the defense for this is Darwin's law. This is I mean, this is what I'm hearing, right? I don't believe this at all. Yeah. So I don't attest to it. I don't agree with it. Right. But the people who would say that I'm being a wuss or I'm being too sensitive are going to say that that Darwin's law says only the fittest survive, the stronger survive, whatever. Right. And they're saying that if you are, and I've heard this from somebody who's close to me, who once said that if you're weak enough to let these things bother you, you deserve whatever happens. Okay. And it blows me away to hear somebody say that to say that you're willing to allow the innocence of a child who doesn't know evil. There are exceptions. I know. I have met some, but generally, children don't know evil. They only know who they are to some degree. They only know what they know.
Yeah, and reactionary, right?
They're very reactionary, and to allow these people to see. I don't believe in good and evil, right? I really don't. I think you can be a very bad person. Yeah. But I don't think it correlates to evil per se. Okay. But if ever I believed in evil, it would be somebody who poisons the mind of a child. For the sole sake of saying, hee, look what I did. Yeah. Look at Stalin and Lenin and all these different people who... Oh, no, that's a whole nother level. Yeah. That's pretty messed up.
Quote-unquote evil.
I don't believe in it, but you're right.
No, but I get the meaning, man. And it's truly a terrifying thought, right? Because at that age, not just impressionable, man, but if you truly, when they're kids specifically... you could shape them into little monsters, and that's I think a lot of the times when you see that cyberbullying, a lot of cowardice is behind that, because again, they're doing that because they don't have to be physically...
It's the inferiority thing again.
And they don't have to be accountable. They don't have to face a person. So there's a lot of cowardice.
Apparently they do now.
Well, I mean, even if they do, I think you're still going to see a lot of people do that. And in my mind, the really big problem with all this is people will not or don't want to accept responsibility for many, many things. That's why you see all these power graphs from all these different movements of different groups trying to just blame each other or become victims of this or another. It's, I think, a lot of it boils down to a lack of responsibility and accountability, and that's why you see these toxic situations online. People, while they have this veil, would be complete D-bags. And in general, I think a lot of it boils down to the way that either they have if it was children, for example, the environment in their homes. You know, that says a lot. You know, when you have a little monster that you're growing up and you're treating him in a very bad way, and you're not really understanding what a foundation is for a child, and it goes out of hand very quickly, and if you don't do the right thing in the first 7 years, man, it's going to be a little monster.
7 years? Is that the psychological?
Well, yeah, that's the most important part when you're raising a child is the first 7 years. If you don't do what's right in the first 7 years, you're going to have a bad time. Your child is going to have a bad time.
Define what's right.
So what I mean by right is foundational, right? So what I mean is you don't want to necessarily use so you ever heard of the Pavlov method?
Sure.
Right. So if positive reinforcement and the other side of it would be negative reinforcement. Like, usually the one thing that works the most is positive reinforcement. But to really do it properly, you have to start very early. And if you do it right, you will notice a big difference in a child's or a person's behavior. But if you leave a person be egotistical, or you leave it be entitled, that's going to start going out of hand very quickly.
Oh, I agree.
And when you get to a point where that kid's 6, 7, 8, 9, everybody at school, I mean, you wouldn't want a little monster next to you, right? I mean, you're a normal person, right? I consider you a person that's set in your ways. You have a good foundation in regard to your moral structure and values. So if you'd had to sit next to a person that would be completely egotistical, totally entitled, bully towards everybody, you wouldn't want that person as your friend, would you?
As my friend? I mean, maybe.
Really?
Let me I know.
Wait a minute.
Let me back that up. I'm the kind of person that will try to change people.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So I'm
Superman complex.
No, not at all. Not at all. Like I feel like, and I don't know if thanks for that, but no. When I see people who are bullies, I have one of two reactions. First one is to be around as often as I can so that I can defend whoever they try to bully. Okay. And that got me into a lot of trouble when I was in school.
Can imagine.
And the second part would be to associate myself with them to show them what the right way is.
Like an example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't consider it a Superman. I've never really thought of it that way.
That's psychological. Long story, but we can talk about that in a little bit, because I want to keep on this train that we're on. So in the sense of that, right? Let's say you're that person. You're that one kid in school which is trying to be a role model. You know, sometimes you might help. You might actually present a situation where the person that you know that is toxic sees something that might change him. But to be honest, for the most time, depending on how that person's environment is at home, the damage might already been done. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So the problem with that is, if you have a situation where the mind of the young person has been shaped in such a way that he's a little monster, it's going to be a very difficult thing for that kid when he's growing up, because
I agree with that.
He's going to be,
I've seen it. We've all seen it.
Right. And he's going to be, isolated. Nobody's going to want to be his friend. That's going to make him bitter. Yeah. So then you're going to see that whole behavior that we've been talking about going to be explosive online. He's going to be a whole full-hearted member of 4chan, saying some horrible things to many, many people, because this bitterness is going to be, billowing inside and just frothing like a powder keg until it just pops. And I think the internet, presents the perfect avenue for people like that.
I agree.
And that's when you said what happens in the future. Man, unfortunately, I foresee a lot of that. A lot of little monsters that are just spiraling vile on the internet, because that's the one place where they can have that veil. And that, in my mind, has a lot to do with cowardice. Because think about it. If you really wanted to say those things, have the consistency, not consistent. I really want to say balls. to say it, to say it in person, to say it to the people, to say it how you should say it, if you truly meant it, or if you truly believed it. Because I think a lot of the times they don't even believe it. They just want to be mean. You know?
I see a lot of that too. I see a lot of, let me just be mean and see what I can get
by the sake of being mean. Yeah, just make belittle person because I feel belittled by the world. You know what I mean?
So I'm sitting there thinking, this conversation was making me think about a lot of elements that I've never really considered before. We see that video games are often blamed for teenagers who go on violent sprees.
Yeah.
And as I sit here and think about it, I wonder if people maybe need to reevaluate, because I do not believe that violent games make violent people.
Neither do I.
I mean, all of my favorite games are the most violent ones.
Yeah.
Just not necessarily demented like the torture scenes.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah, violence is fun and it's a good way to blow off steam.
Absolutely.
As long as it's in a game.
No, I mean,
or in a movie.
Realistically, man, I don't think that there's any from again, it's been a very long time, but when I remember reading about this, there was very little evidence to the fact of it actually involving people or shaping people into a more violent structure.
Right.
They were blamed left and right by popular media every single time, just like the music, just like all these different avenues of social or popular culture. But no, man, in my mind, it boils back down to the same thing we were talking about. It's how you grew up, your environment you were in growing up, your parents have to do a lot with it, and that more than anything is going to shape you to who you are. It's not what you're playing or what entertains you. So
I guess I have my thought process is two-pronged to that. The first one being, maybe that's not so true now. Maybe these violent video games are contributing to this.
You think?
But not the game, the interaction with people in the game.
I see your point. Well, I mean, maybe I get what you're saying. It's not the actual element or the idea of you having a Grand Theft Auto-like environment where you can just murder and cause mayhem. It's the actuality of how do you treat actual people. Is that what you mean?
No, I was referring
the interaction
to
with people.
I'm referring to the multiplayer. We're talking about, like, for those who don't know, when you get online to a game like Call of Duty or Battlefield or things like that, depending on your luck, really, you might be called everything from expletive deleted to expletive deleted.
Yeah.
And I can't help but wonder if maybe that is contributing to.
I see what you mean.
But there's no way to stop that other than not allow people to talk, and that's one of the reasons why people do these things.
That's a very difficult thing.
Clearly, yeah.
We cannot. I am all for freedom of speech. We cannot do that. Even if anything, and I think we both have heard this before, we should give everybody the voice to say whatever there is. Doesn't matter how crazy it is. You know why? Because they're going to reveal how crazy they are.
Sure.
So if they can scream the loudest in the most horrible way possible, but you know what? They're going to be identified as the most craziest and horrible as they are. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So in other words, you can see for whomever it is, it doesn't matter if they're anonymous or not. If you see a person that's saying some horrible, vile stuff, fine, say it. But there's going to be a bunch of other people saying very interesting stuff, which is why we should have freedom of speech. So I don't think we should control what people say. And in general, how is that going to affect people? Yes, there's going to be a lot of bitter people that are going to go towards that person who's violent and destructive and just mean. But there's a more complicated scenario when you have to start drawing the boundaries of how do you deal with that. Because you obviously, like, to your point, that will affect people. But you can't control it just by saying you can't say blah. You can't say this or that or that or this.
No, that only makes the urge to say it stronger.
Yeah. So I think there's a very difficult conversation. It's a very difficult thing to have to deal with. And again, to your very good question of what the future looks like, it's going to be complicated, man. Because you cannot start saying we're not going to say this or we're not going to say that. But at the same time, you can't let that type of situation run free range. So I really don't know enough to be able to say what we should do. But I think what we definitely can't do is start saying what you can and you can't say. So once we start going down that road, man, it's going to be a very, very dark.
Well, isn't that kind of? I guess this is a slight segue from the idea of what we've been talking about, but isn't that kind of the issue that we're facing right now with colleges putting limitations on what can be said?
Yeah, man, don't get me. Yeah, that's horrifying. Like, you can't do that. That's, in my mind, and I think you echo this because we've had talks about this before. If you go to college to test your limits of knowledge, of what you like, of what you don't like. You want to see who you are. How can you do that if you can't have a conversation?
I agree.
You can't.
I agree.
You know, there's, in my mind, it's kind of the complete opposite of what college should be. I've
actually grown to hate the word safe space and microaggression.
I mean, dude, I honestly think that that's going to be something that we're going to be, as this culture, we're going to, how do you say, the repercussions of that is going to be very, very grim.
But do you think that's just because we're older that we feel that way? Maybe the newer generation doesn't feel as you know,
I think all of
strong?
This. No. I think I'm like where we're going with this, because everything kind of ties together. A lot of this has to do with the way that all these young people grew up. Like you said, we grew up in a different way. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have any of that. We had to be accountable for what we did. We had to be responsible for what we did. A lot of that's not the same way anymore. And this culture that we have now kind of personifies or popularizes the famous individual or the famous ego more than anything. And that in and of itself is going to kind of push this idea of power, you know, like this individual power of fame or whatever you want to call it. And then when you see all these different people having this voice in these places, like you said, a lot of the colleges and things like that, they're kind of leveraging what they don't even understand it as power, because that's what they have. They have power, right? What they're grabbing at it, more than anything, it's not really an idea. It's the fact that they have power, and that they're leveraging in such a way that they can enact change. And in the end, I think that's what it boils down to. It's not what they're trying to do, even though they're going to probably stab me in the face if I would say them. But I would say it to them in person, because that's what I really believe, man. A lot of this boils down.
I agree with you.
A lot of it boils down more towards the idea of power than it is to the ideals behind what they're actually saying. Because if you want to have a conversation about freedom, or you want to have a conversation about feelings, you have to have the conversation.
Yeah,
you can't say you can't
dance around it,
or just say you said something that was so disagreeable that now I can never speak to you again, and now we cannot talk or be in the same room. That doesn't make sense. You have to be willing to not offend, but you have to be willing to at least have a negative effect.
I will say this: I have my son and I had a conversation today where he was very upset. And he locked himself in his room. Well, not locked, but he went in there, he closed the door, and proceeded to get even more upset. I walked in to have a conversation. I said, all right, let's talk about what happened. And he said, I really don't want to talk right now.
Yeah.
And I said, well, unfortunately, that doesn't matter.
Okay.
And he's like, why doesn't it matter? I said, because problems don't get fixed unless you talk about them. Mm-hmm. Unless we have a conversation and we come to a common ground about what our expectation is and understand things. Dude, within 5 minutes, everything was good. Right. He understood. I understood. We had that moment where we connected. We now understand.
Yeah.
He understands, don't do this because this is bad, and I understand.
Right.
You know, the various elements of it as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. Today's modern world, I feel like there's a lot of children who are missing out on that. Yeah. That kind of face-to-face, parents, things being harder to live. Parents are working harder.
Yeah.
And I admit that I'm not always as present for them as I probably should be.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's probably something that's happening in the world all the time. Mm-hmm. A great deal more now than when you and I were growing up.
Yeah. But I mean, we had a different society. We had the economy was different back then. You could have, a person that was, one person income type of situation. That helps out a lot. I mean, it's important, especially in the younger years, to have a role model, somebody that does exactly what you did, does exactly what you did. Sorry, thought that, not said it. But seriously though, like, it's this very important thing. And if you had more people like what you were saying or doing right there, and that would be more of a ubiquitous thing, you'd have people that would be willing to be in an uncomfortable situation and talk about important subjects without having the fear of, oh, you're hurting my feelings, or, oh, I feel insulted. No, life won't care if you're insulted. Life will keep going. You have to be strong enough to understand that you have to face things for what they are, and not everybody's going to have the same opinion as you. And that's the whole point of going to a place where you challenge ideas.
Absolutely.
You can't challenge an idea without putting yourself in a situation or in a state of willing to get hurt.
Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but Ben Shapiro's famous line is, "Facts don't care about your feelings."
Well, that's a good point, I guess.
No, I think it's really, really great. There's for the folks at home, if you like people who have a very interesting, very intellectual rhetoric, then Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, all of these people, these are guys that even if you don't agree with them, you should probably give them a listen, because the way they present their argument, I think, is what's shaping me now as an adult.
Okay.
To realize that, first off, you shouldn't be afraid to communicate these things. Yeah. Second off, you have to, another thing that Ben Shapiro says is, don't label something, generically. If it's racist or if it's unfair, then come to me and show me an example and we'll fight it together. Mm-hmm. But don't just label it because you don't like it.
Okay.
And I think these are all things that need to be perpetuated in the minds of other people.
Well, I mean, it's important to state things as what they are, I guess. But if anything, man, there's a lot of intellectuals out there that are very eloquent in what they say. But most importantly, I think what you should have in my mind is a stable point to whether or not things are going out of hand is extremism. If you start seeing any type of person, doesn't matter if it's an intellectual or not, once they start going to extremes, that should be a red flag.
So we're coming at the end of our hour, and I have what could potentially be a right hook from hell for you.
Okay.
So, for these people,
yeah,
let's say that we have had conversations before about our belief in the God's spirit worlds, heaven, hell.
Yeah.
For these people who do these kinds of things where they bully and they talk very ugly, mm-hmm. is that like a trip to hell, or is that?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like,
so how does this?
Exactly.
So okay, that's a very good question. It depends on what religion you're talking about, right? Like this whole concept. It's funny if you mentioned that the idea of hell and the devil. In Christianity and Catholicism, it used to be something that was laughable before the time of the witches, where it became actually something that was feared of like particularly the devil, not just being bad. But I'm kind of straying from the subject. So to your point, I think that we can say one thing for sure is that it doesn't matter what you believe in or what religion you adhere to, if you know that whatever you're doing is going to be negative toward your fellow man or woman, in general, the repercussions of it, like it be it karma or be it whatever else, should be pretty clear. But there is this one like scapegoat when it comes to some of the religions, right? In the end, if you say you're sorry, you should be okay, right?
Oh yeah, atonement.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very difficult thing to think of. In my mind, it's always been more of an easy scapegoaty tactic, if you know what I mean.
No, absolutely.
You could be a terrible person for all your life until that one last second you say, I'm sorry for all I did, and you're good. Yeah. Here's your golden ticket.
See, this came to mind because there's a lot of rappers who say some really, rapper music-wise, who say really negative things, but then go to church all the time and be like, God is, he's with me.
Yeah.
But this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. Yeah. As always, if you guys have any topics for additional conversations, feel free to email us at BoandJoePodcast@gmail.com. Or just comment down below, and we will get to it as soon as we can. As always, I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time.